Buying vintage used cameras can have some pitfalls. If you don't know what you're looking for, you could end up with a camera that's not very good, that doesn't work. So let's take a look at what you need to do when you're buying a vintage used camera. Hey, thanks for joining me this morning. So I was out looking at some used cameras the other day, and it occurred to me that there's probably a lot of people that don't really know quite what to look for and how to evaluate a vintage camera. You know, you can go to a lot of places and find them, garage sales, flea markets, and of course there's online sales. The challenge with online sales is you kind of have to trust the person that's selling it to you. But when you get the camera, you need to know how to evaluate it so you know if it's really functional. So let's take a look at what you have to do to evaluate a vintage camera. And these ideas that I'm going to give you, or these guidelines I'm going to give you, are really things you can do when you're out buying and shopping. Ultimately, when you get the camera home, running a test roll through it is the real way to see if everything's working right. So let's get started. Before we do, if you would please click on the like and subscribe buttons. That really helps the channel grow. And let's take a look at my workbench here. I'm going to show you some different cameras and show you how to check them out. Let's say you go to a garage sale or a flea market or something, and you find a camera that you're interested in. Maybe it's a 35mm SLR, maybe it's a folding medium format camera, some kind of camera like that, and you want to know how to evaluate it and see if it's going to be okay if you buy it. Well, the first thing to do is look at overall appearance. You know, is the leather curled up or peeling? Is there rust on the camera? Corrosion? Are there any big dents or dings or, you know, obvious damage to the camera? I mean, you know, big dents in the camera. You know, if everything looks pretty clean, you know, you want to open the camera up. Most cameras that are folding like this will have a button. It might be on the bottom, might be at the top, but it'll be a button that opens the camera. And then you can kind of look at again, keep looking at appearance. Does everything look pretty clean? Does the bellows look worn or tattered? Or does it look pretty, you know, the corners especially, do they look okay? You know, if the camera looks pretty good in overall appearance, generally speaking, you're in pretty good shape to start with. You know, if it's a 35mm SLR, again, look it over. Are there any big dents or dings or anything that, you know, obvious signs of damage? Before you open it up, you can turn the rewind knob and make sure there's no film in it. And then most 35mm SLRs, you lift the rewind knob. Now, Nikons have a little catch or a latch you have to turn to lift this up. Some cameras don't. And then pulling up a little harder on it will typically open the back. Again, you want to look at overall appearance. Does everything look like it's in pretty good shape? And you know, we're just looking for obvious signs of damage or abuse. If everything looks pretty good visually, and on a 35mm SLR, it's important you take the lens off too. Most cameras will have a button you push, turn the lens. Nikon's turn clockwise to take the lens off. Most other brands turn counterclockwise. You can look inside and see if there's anything that's really obvious. And then, of course, put the lens back on. Now, if everything looks good appearance-wise, then we want to start looking at operation. How does the camera operate? Well, one of the first things that's important is knowing if the shutter works. And the shutter or shutter speed dial here, you can set different shutter speeds. Now, if this is a mechanical camera, you'll be able to actually hear some of the operation, and different sounds will help guide you as to what, you know, what's working and what's not. If it's electronic, assuming that the battery's okay, you know, you won't actually hear some of the same sounds, but you should be able to see the same things happening. So if I set this, one of the first things I'll do is set it on a low shutter speed, like 1 second. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to hear the slow speed gear train. And I'm going to try to be real quiet so you can hear this. I'm going to wind the camera and listen very carefully. You hear a slight buzzing sound as the shutter operates. And you can actually see the shutter open and close. That should be working pretty smoothly. You can then turn it to faster shutter speeds. And you don't have to hit every single speed. But, you know, try to hit, I mean, if you can, if you have time, hit every single speed. See if they all seem to, you know, change as you go from one speed to another. And, you know, all the slower speeds below about 1/8 of a second, you should hear that buzzing sound. From a 15th on up, it'll be a little quicker than, you won't hear a buzzing sound. You'll see the speed get faster and faster. And you know, if it seems like every time you change the shutter speed, the result either gets faster or slower depending on which way you turn it, your shutter's probably going to be okay. Now, on leaf shutter cameras like this old Netar, the shutter speeds are set on a dial up here at the top, and they're not as easy to really see. Let me get a little closer here. You can see this ring that you turn, and this camera only has bulb, which means the shutter is just going to be held open while you hold the button, and then a 25th of a second, a 75th, and a 200th. So I can check this. Now you have to manually cock this kind of shutter, and then you can activate it. You won't hear that slow speed gear train on this kind of a shutter because it just doesn't go slow enough. But the slowest speed should sound, you know, slower than the middle speed, which sounds a little faster, and then the highest speed should sound very fast. So you can see that all those things seem to be working. Now, the controls should, you know, these, like on a leaf shutter camera, these rings should turn pretty smoothly and easily. If they're really hard to turn, that is a good sign that the shutter might need to be cleaned and lubed. On the 35mm SLR, you want to make sure that, you know, the wind lever turns smoothly, you know, that all the controls turn smoothly, rewind knob turns smoothly, doesn't feel, you know, gritty or anything. And you know, any controls that are on the camera, you want to make sure that they turn smoothly. You can wind the camera and it feels smooth. It should not feel gritty or rough or take much effort to wind. It should be very easy. And then the next thing you want to do is look for sources of light leaks. Now, on any camera, the back door is an issue, but on these cameras that have a bellows, one of the real causes of light leaks are worn corners on these bellows. And there's a way to check for it. I use, anytime I'm going to go out and look for cameras, I carry a flashlight, like this little mini mag light. And I like this type of light for a couple of reasons. One is, of course, I can turn this one on. And this one I've actually outfitted with a cap that has a push button. And so that makes it turning it on a little easier. And these are, you can also focus. But the reason I like the mini mag light is you can unscrew the end of this, and then you have a light that just is a bulb, like a bare bulb, and there's a reason for that. So what I do with this, on a camera with a bellows, I will open the camera up and try to, if I can, in a darkened area or darkened room, turn the light on. Now my light's going to be uncooperative. So we turn a light on and we go inside the bellows with the light. And then I want to look on the outside of the corners and see if I see any light coming through the corners. Now, that might be, you know, if you're outside, it might be really hard to see. And so if you're outside, the best thing is to just examine the bellows carefully. You can also get your face up close to shade the inside of the bellows with your face and see if you can just, you know, with your eye up in here, see if you can see any light coming through the corners. But, you know, generally speaking, if the corners don't look worn or abraded, then generally you're going to be okay. You don't want to see any big cracks or tears or anything in the bellows. Now, as far as the back door, most cameras have some kind of felt or foam or a cloth seal along the hinge side of the door. On modern, well, more modern 35mm SLRs, there will be a Nikon. This one has kind of a fuzzy felt kind of strip here that is the seal. You want to make sure that's intact. If this has a foam seal, and if the foam is sticky or gooey, then it's going to need a new seal. Now, these are pretty easy to make at home. You can get, I use, you know, you can go to the home, like Home Depot or Lowe's, and you can buy adhesive back to weather stripping. But the kind you want to get is black neoprene. You don't want the gray soft foam. You want black neoprene foam, and you can actually, with scissors, just cut a piece and, you know, peel off what's there and clean it, and maybe use some lighter fluid to clean the old glue off, and then put glue on a new seal. And it's just, you know, they can be cut out with scissors. Now, most 35mm SLRs will have a little latch here where you can actually take the door off. So if you need to work on that, it's sometimes a little easier with the door taken off. Now, a lot of 35mm SLRs will also have seals inside this area where the door closes, where the door, the edge of the door kind of goes into the body. A lot of older cameras don't necessarily have that. Generally speaking, that's usually not too much the cause of light leaks. The hinge on the door is the greatest culprit. But if those are bad, again, you can replace those. I have used adhesive back strips of felt. You have to take a toothpick or something and dig out all the old stuff, but you can actually replace those seals. There is not a seal on this end. It's just a good size overlap. Some cameras might have a little seal on the door here. Most of them don't, but you want to make sure the edge of the door looks like it's not bent. Everything opens and closes easily. So light leaks, can be a real problem. If the camera's leaking light, it can certainly ruin your film. So you want to just examine those seals to see if they look like they're in good shape. And make sure the door closes securely and doesn't look bent or damaged. So light leaks can be a real, problem. And if you have a camera that leaks light, then it's a real disappointment when you get your first roll back and it's all fogged and ruined. So you definitely want to look for that. The next thing are the lenses. Now, on a 35mm SLR, and again, I like to use a flashlight. I'll take the lens off the camera, open the aperture up wide, and I'm going to actually shine a light through the lens. I don't know if I can really make this show up on camera. But you want to shine a light through the lens. And when you do that, what you're going to see is if there's debris or dust or dirt inside the lens, or if it's foggy, it's really going to show up. If you don't have a flashlight with you, just look backwards through the lens or forwards. You can look from either end, and don't look at the sun with it, obviously, but kind of look at a bright area, or if you're in a room, just look at like at the light on the ceiling, and you can actually see if the lens looks nice and clear. The lens should be very clear. There shouldn't be any fogginess or cloudiness. The aperture should open and close smoothly. Now, some 35mm SLRs, you won't see this open and close unless you flip this little lever on the back that the camera uses to open and close it. So you might have to stop the lens down to like f16 or f22 and then flip this little lever and see if almost all 35mm SLRs will have a little lever like this. And you can actually see that the aperture works nice and smooth. Of course, you can also put it on the camera and fire the camera and watch it open and close. It'll be wide open when you are just looking through the lens. You can see it's nice and wide. I'm going to put this on a slow shutter speed so you can see it. It's wide, but then when you take a picture, it stops down. There, you can see it right there. So you should see that aperture move nice and smoothly. The focus should work very smooth. It shouldn't be rough or gritty. If you find you can't turn it at all on an old camera, then that lens is going to need some repair. One of the problems today is that there's not very many places that repair cameras, film cameras anymore, and the cost of repairing a film camera can often exceed the value of the camera. So it's real important that you learn to evaluate these things so that everything seems to work okay. These kind of cameras usually often have just what they call front element focusing, where the front element turns. And that should turn nice and smoothly. Again, if you can't turn it, if it's stuck, then that's a real problem. Okay, the next thing is, on a 35mm SLR, look through the viewfinder. You should be able to see the focusing screen. You should be able to look around and focus on objects. Look at something at a distance and see if, when you turn it to infinity, it looks like it's in focus. Focus on things up close. If there's a little bit of debris on the focusing screen, that doesn't really hurt anything. It won't be in the image, but if it's really full of junk on the focusing screen, that's going to bother you, and you could use it, but eventually you probably would want to have it cleaned. Now, the functionality of the camera, looking for light leaks, seeing if the lens looks nice and clear, aperture and the focus all seem to work smoothly. If all those things work, then generally speaking, you're ready for a test roll. And so if you buy the camera and take it home, you have a good likelihood of a success at that point. If you find something that's really stuck or not working, like I say, that repairs on these kind of cameras can often exceed the value of the camera. So you'll see sometimes people will buy an old camera, and I've seen this on some videos online, and they'll shoot a test roll and they'll have light leaks or the other focus problems or something, and so then they'll just put it on a shelf and go buy another one. And you know, they keep doing that till they get a good one. But if you, and that's one of the dangers of buying things online. If you ever buy a camera online, or if you have one repaired, run some test rolls through it. And if you can buy a camera online and get some assurance from make sure you've got a good return policy, of course. But if the seller indicates that film has been, a test roll has been shot on the camera, and especially if they show images from the camera, then that's a real plus. But, I've purchased a lot of cameras online. Since I know how to repair cameras, then that it's not quite as big a concern to me if I think there might be a minor problem. But even for me, if I get a camera and it's all full of gunk in the lens and it's really bad, it's sometimes just, more trouble to deal with than it's worth. One thing to kind of just back up, when you're looking through the lens, again, you want your lens to be nice and clear. But there's a thing you can see on cameras, and it could be in the viewfinder, it could be in the lens, but there is a fungus that attacks optical glass. And it has different forms, but it generally looks kind of like little spider webby looking things across the glass, or fuzzy little spots in the glass. If a camera has fungus, then the problem is that's, often not cleanable. And you have to take the lens apart to clean it, and it can be a big problem. And in some cases, the lens can be repaired, but in some cases it can't, and the fungus is just ruins it. So if you find a camera and there's a bunch of fungus in it, probably would want to avoid it. The other problem is, some say that if you have a camera with fungus in it and you put that near other cameras that don't have fungus, it's a fungus, so it can spread. I really haven't experienced that myself. But I've heard a lot of people say that, if they've got a camera that's got some fungus in it, they don't put it near any other cameras, or they'll keep it sealed up in a plastic bag because they don't want that fungus, the spores from that fungus getting in other cameras, which I suppose is possible. It got in there in the first place. So anyway, those are some things to look at if you're looking to buy a used camera that might help you evaluate what you're buying. Well, that should give you some ideas on what to look for when you're buying a vintage camera. Make sure you get one that works properly, and you have a good chance of success when you get home before you even run a test roll through it. I used to repair cameras for a living, and when you're repairing cameras, you don't have time to run a test roll through every camera you repair. So you learn how to evaluate the cameras and test them, so when the customer gets the camera, it's going to be fine. That being said, anytime you buy a new camera, like a vintage film camera, or have one repaired, it's always a good idea to run a test roll or two through it, just to make sure everything's good before you go out and do take it on some important assignment, or even take it on a vacation where you really want to rely on it. So that hopefully that gives you some ideas on some things to look for. I really appreciate you joining me and watching my videos. If you would, please leave me a comment if you have any thoughts or questions. And as always, thanks for watching.